But maybe the most disturbing example of all of how race-based inequality persists in America is in our criminal justice system.
Today, there are more African Americans under correctional control in prison or jail on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began.
Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, argues persuasively that America's war on drugs has resulted in a devastating new system of racial control.
Many Americans just have no idea the scale of mass incarceration in the United States because it's a phenomenon that does not affect everyone. It affects certain groups defined largely by race and class.
Breaking news out of Contra Costa County, a drug bust in Pacheco.
Charged in what officials say is the largest drug bust in Baltimore County.
Suspect's not home, but minutes later he unwittingly walks into the dragnet.
What's your name?
My name?
Yeah.
My name Antoine.
Got him.
The size of our prison system quintupled in a 30-year period of time, not due to rising crime rates, but rather because we declared a drug war, a war on drugs.
These people are wrecking our society.
If you're a casual drug user, you're an accomplice to murder.
All of us agree that the gravest domestic threat facing our nation today is drugs.
And launched a Get Tough movement that swept millions of poor people, overwhelmingly poor folks of color, into our prisons and jails, primarily for nonviolent and drug-related offenses, the very sorts of crimes that occur with roughly equal frequency in middle-class white communities and on college campuses and go largely ignored. You know, a white kid living in rural Kansas doesn't drive to the hood to get his marijuana or his meth or his ecstasy or a little bit of cocaine. He's buying it from someone most likely of his own race down the road. Drug dealing happens in all communities of all colors, but those who do time for drug crime in the United States are overwhelmingly black and brown. Once they're caught, they're swept into the criminal justice system, branded criminals and felons, and then ushered into a parallel social universe in which the basic civil and human rights that were supposedly won in the civil rights movement are stripped from them. Once branded a criminal or felon, they're denied the right to vote in many states, automatically excluded from juries, and legally discriminated against in employment, housing, access to education, and public benefits.
If you break the law, you no longer have a home in public housing.
So many of the old forms of discrimination that we supposedly left behind in the old Jim Crow era are suddenly legal again once you've been branded a felon. That's why I say we haven't ended racial caste in America, we've just redesigned it.